All right, guys, welcome back to the channel. I know I'm a few days late on this, but Candace Owens made an appearance on the Dr. Phil show. They had a discussion about admissions in college being discriminatory, and is discrimination a two-way street, like the title says right there. So we're about to get into this. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe while we're watching. Now let's roll it.
Well, is it justified, though? Because if there has been disparity and if there has been discrimination, if there have been minorities that have been excluded for years and years and years and years, is this the way to start to bring some balance and diversity back to those universities and workplaces?
Absolutely not. Affirmative action has been going on for over 50 years, so this has been happening for a long time. And even now, we've actually seen that it's gotten worse in the sense that race relations are so poisonous, and many people on college campuses actually feel like, because of all of this that's happening, they feel like they're being pitted against each other.
Doctor, what do you think?
Well, I think I would very respectfully disagree. I certainly don't think that white people are disadvantaged in college admissions. In fact, I would say it is the exact opposite, which is why there are policies and practices in place now to try to alleviate the historical burden. It's like, if you ever played Monopoly before, right? Imagine like you have a person who's playing Monopoly and they get to go around multiple times, right? And then like halfway through the game, someone gets to enter into the game. And then because they get a turn, right, then the accusation is, well, somehow that game is unfair. The kind of accusation, what we would say is reverse racism.
The problem I have with this example is that he painted with a very broad brush. Now I get it, he had to draw that example up on the spot, but it doesn't take into account the specific details of, you know, every person that's admitted into college and every person that works hard to get admitted into college. Now, from an economic standpoint, yes, white households make more than black households, and white people probably do have more opportunities, you know, if you're looking at it that broadly. But that doesn't take into account that there are white people and white families that don't have the same access and advantage as other white families, and it doesn't take into account that there are black people and black families who don't have the same access as other black families. There are black families who sit above the typical average earning income for black families, and there are white people who sit below the typical average earned income for white families. You know, just because you're white, that doesn't necessarily mean that you coming from this place of advantage.
We really just view it as what we call race sliding. Race sliding is what happens when gaslighting is racial. And essentially, if you look historically, colleges and universities have prioritized admissions for students who are white. Why is that? When you admit a student, it's oftentimes based upon your grades, high school grades, and your test scores, ACT and SAT, which are being phased out due to COVID-19. But if you think about it, the SAT and ACT have historically measured access to resources, the neighborhood that you grow up in. It is not a measure of a student's drive, a student's motivation. It is really a measure of their access. And ultimately, we know that when things measure access, they really measure white privilege.
Candace, are we compromising standards
Yes.
if we do that because we haven't fixed the problem down the line?
That's correct. It is the policies are harmful also to the people that they purport to help. And we have all of the evidence there to look at. When you artificially place a Black American into a school in which they do not belong based on their knowledge, doesn't mean that they go on to get A's. In fact, there was a Black adjunct professor, you guys have definitely heard of him, Dr. Thomas Sowell, who was teaching at Cornell University, and he found that the majority of the Black American students that were there were on academic probation. Now, these students were some of the smartest in the nation, but because they were artificially placed amongst their peers at Cornell University, they were failing on academic probation. These policies have never helped Black Americans. It's just basically policies that are put in place to make people feel good, right? I feel like I'm doing something when in fact I'm actually creating harm. You either know the answers or you don't.
When you say, hey, we have Black students at a particular school who aren't performing at that school as well, the immediate assumption that you're making is, well, maybe it's because they're not smart enough, they're not good enough, or they don't belong here. Whereas it could be about the experience that they're having at that institution. Professors who believe that they're not intelligent enough, that they don't have the capability to do the work, that they see them as criminals, deviants, dangerous, up to no good, or they talk about them with the they statements. They're lazy, they don't care, they don't really belong here.
Damn. Well, hold on, bro. Hold on. Because so now he's making a lot of insinuations. He jumping to some conclusions. All Candace is saying is that if you go by affirmative action and you admit students into a college where they didn't have to meet the same criteria that everyone else had to meet to make it into the college, that they will be going in maybe not as well equipped, maybe not as well aware of some of the materials that they're going to be studying and looking at, because they didn't have to rise to the same standard as those other students. That's all she's saying. I mean, and that's not too far-fetched of a conclusion to come to, because the standard for the black students was lower, whereas the standard for the whites and the Asians was higher. Is that saying that they're dumb or they can't learn the material or that they're disruptive? No, not necessarily. But what it is pointing to is that they might be in over their heads because, again, they didn't have to rise to the same standard. Whereas this guy is saying, no, that's not true. They're 100% capable. They're just having a rough time, a rough experience. Maybe they're experiencing some sort of discrimination at the school, and that's why they're not rising to the occasion. But one thing I can add to this story from an anecdotal perspective, I was never good at school. School was never really my thing, and I never went to no fancy school. You know, I went to community college, but I know what it's like to feel out of place. I know what it's like to feel like you're in over your head when the teacher is discussing certain materials and, certain lessons in class. And when you don't know what's going on in the classroom, that makes you feel, that alone can, make you feel in over your head, and that could lead you to be disruptive or lazy or to not try as much because, you just feel like you're drowning every day learning these lessons that you know nothing about, that you're not prepared to learn about. And that could either be because of you being placed into a program that you weren't ready for, or because of your unpreparedness when going to class.
It could be. I'm giving you actual facts.
No,
right?
I'm giving you actual facts based upon extensive
and you can say, well, maybe they just don't feel
done.
good. But that's not the case. I mean, I went to university. I did not feel good, right? I didn't pull the best grades in high school, probably got into a better university than I should have gotten into based on my performance in high school. It wasn't because of my feelings. It's because I wasn't focused on it. And that, we're talking about a cultural problem, what's going on back at home, as was in my circumstance. And none of that is because of institutionalized policy. It almost seems like you guys refuse to accept that, black students aren't performing well. You feel like you have to have this burden of responsibility when, in fact, if you actually wanted to help, you would look at the facts, re-examine the fact that it's not helping anybody, it's not helping black Americans to artificially place them into universities, and you'd make effective change.
But you're making the assumption that black students are academically inferior, and they're not.
No,
they're
you
some of
are
our most brilliant students that we have.
That's the basic, no. That you are making the assumption that they're inferior.
You just said that they don't belong there.
Policies. I'm talking about the students that are based on the policies that you are defending right now, saying that we should have these policies that let them into these universities, not based on their skill set, but based on the color of their skin. So you are assuming that they are inferior.
Comedian Tyler.
Yeah, and look, I ain't come here to just back Candace's every point. No, but I understand what she's saying once again. You are saying that these students are inferior by lowering the standards. Period. That's it. The buck stops right there. If you have to lower the standards for students to get into a certain institution, to a certain college, then you are saying that they're inferior. It's like a nice way of saying that you're inferior. It's like, oh, maybe you didn't come from a family who prioritized learning. Maybe your high school wasn't the best. You didn't have the most resources. You didn't have this. You didn't have that. So let me lower the standards for you to get in. You're in a nice way saying that they aren't at the same level as these other students.
Would you say that white teachers cannot conduct classrooms as successfully as black teachers, but that's really only true with students of color, correct?
So what I would say is that when we
What's what you did say?
Well, what I say is that when we look at teachers who are the most effective with teaching our most underrepresented students, they tend to be individuals who come from underrepresented backgrounds. But the reason that they're also effective also with white students as well is because oftentimes your faculty of color aren't solely focused just on the cognitive, but also on the relational. Because relationships are a foundational precondition to effective teaching, learning, counseling, advising, or any support practice. Said differently, it doesn't matter how good you teach. If you don't have a relationship with the student, you won't be as effective as you could be. And our faculty of color and staff of color tend to do that.
I mean, I understand what he's getting at. I understand what he's trying to say, but your job as a student, regardless of your relationship with your teacher, is to go to school and put your best foot forward and learn the materials, do what you have to do outside of school so you can thrive and make it to the next level in academics. You know, when I was going to school, I knew plenty of students who didn't have a great relationship with the teacher. It might have helped. It might have made class more fun, but they still passed, got good grades, and did what they had to do. And just speaking to this notion that black teachers teach black kids better. I mean, you know, I went to a school that was predominantly black. It was mostly black, Hispanic, very little white people in the school. And I saw black kids being taught by black teachers who didn't give a F that they were black. They did not care at all. Even black teachers couldn't get to them as students.
Talking about the art of teaching. You're talking about building relationships. They are actually failing when it comes to actually teaching these kids things. This is why
who's failing?
I'm telling you, inner city communities. I'm talking about Baltimore, Minneapolis, Los Angeles. All of the inner city communities are failing black children because they're focusing on the art and not the actual facts. In Baltimore,
We're
as
talking
just
about
one
teacher
example,
diversity, though. You're referring to the full density of the school.
I'm talking about the art of teaching, which you're saying they're better for the student. They're actually not better for the student, right?
So you're saying that faculty of color are not
schools in
effective?
Baltimore, which is an inner city, which focuses, I suppose, on the art of teaching, they couldn't find a single black child, that was proficient in reading and writing because they think that having somebody who looks like you somehow means that it's going to be better. And also, please, I have to clarify this because when we talk about these quotas and someone says, well, there's this many white people teaching and there's this many black people teaching, welcome to America. Black Americans, okay, I don't know how everybody's doing in their math these days. Black Americans represent just 13% of the population, okay, right? White Americans represent 60% of the population, okay? So if you walk into a room and you find that there's only 13% of the room that is black American and 60% of the room is white American, you are actually walking into a room that is holistic.
Yeah, I mean, to expect us to be just as represented based on the numbers alone, it only being 13% of us and about 60-something% of white people, how is it that we could even be equally represented? Like from the numbers themselves, that's a very hard thing to achieve. All right, guys, so that's all I got for the video. It's a little bit of time remaining in this video that we're watching, but I'm gonna leave it in the description so you can check it out for yourself. My final point to make on this video is that coming from where black people have came from in this country, I could understand why you would think, you know, affirmative action is the right thing to do and that it makes everything equal, it levels the playing field, but it does have drawbacks. It could definitely have adverse effects. And I think the main focus should revolve around building a structure within the family that prepares kids to be academic, thriving students. You know, when you look at the Asian community, the reason why they are so overly represented in, you know, in a lot of very high earning career fields like doctors, scientists, CEOs, and other things of that nature is because they come from cultures where learning is very important. Growing up in an Asian household, from what I've seen, requires that you take school very seriously. If everyone had parents who made school as important as they make it for, you know, let's just say the Asian community, then we would see better results from everybody across the board. But unfortunately, in other communities like the black community, for example, it's not as stressed and it's not as important. You know, Asians didn't rise to where they rose to because of privilege. They didn't have privilege. They had to come here, work hard, and become successful so that they could pass on that success from generation to generation and instill those same hardworking values from generation to generation. I think that should be the focus for the black community to yield better results and better outcomes in education and within careers. Like Candace mentioned, you have schools in Baltimore, and I did a video on this. I'll probably link it somewhere up here. You have schools in Baltimore where majority of the kids aren't even reading at the efficient grade levels. Kids could barely read. They could barely do math. You know, what is affirmative action going to do for kids like this? Nothing. We've witnessed the degradation of the educational system. You know, kids aren't learning and aren't retaining materials the way that they used to. It's just getting worse and worse. And I think focusing on that will have better long-term results than affirmative action ever could. Get them while they're young and transform them into better students. So that way, when they get to college, when they get to the college level, they're prepared. They don't need affirmative action to get into a certain college. They can do the exact same things that these other students can. Also, school choice will be a great thing for parents who want to send their kids to schools with higher learning, more resources, and for parents who see that that spark in their kids' eye to want to learn and to want to be more and to want to achieve more. But that's it for the video, you guys. Let me know what you thought about this in the comments down below. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe when you're at the door. And until next time, I'm out of here. Peace.